Hi, and congrats on your TeamConnect upgrade. This video will walk you through the new features that you will find after your TeamConnect upgrade between versions 6.1 and 6.3.7. Feel free to use the embedded navigation to go directly to the updates that are most relevant to you. A multi-factor authentication feature was added in TeamConnect 6.3.1. This feature allows you to add an extra layer of security to TeamConnect accounts that utilize standard authentication. Please note that multi-factor authentication is not applicable to users with single sign-on authentication. Users with multi-factor authentication applied will verify their identity using a second factor of authentication. After logging in, they will be presented with a screen like this, and they can choose to get their security token from an authenticator app on their phone, via email, or via text message. Multi-factor authentication offers improved security, increased flexibility, and employee productivity. Multi-factor authentication allows you to grant access to several outside council users so that they could log into TeamConnect with limited rights and make updates directly to their matters without compromising security. This feature also makes it safer to expose TeamConnect for use outside of your company network to accommodate those who work from home without dependency on a VPN. To activate multi-factor authentication, navigate to the Security tab found in your Admin Settings object. You can enable and/or require multi-factor authentication. Enabling and requiring authentication will apply the feature to all TeamConnect user accounts. Enabling without requiring authentication will allow you to apply the feature to specific security groups only. To add multi-factor authentication to a specific security group, access the group's general page, open it for editing, and select the checkbox labeled Require Multi-Factor Authentication. This will require multi-factor authentication only from users in this security group. In versions 6.3.3 and higher, we have two new global search settings. These are both found in the Search Results tab of your Admin Settings object. The first of these features will focus exact matches in your global search results. This means that when I conduct a global search, I will see a red exact tag on all results that contain an exact match to my search string. There's also a new filter that comes with this setting that will allow users to show only exact matches. The second global search feature will highlight match fragments in your results so that when you conduct a search, TeamConnect will highlight where that search string appears in each of your results, essentially telling you why these results appeared in your search. In TeamConnect 6.3.5, we added interactive search grids for object collections and custom searches. When viewing the results of an object collection or custom search, you'll see interactive grids in action. In these grids, there are two levels of searches. There's a table level search, which will search all the different columns of the table for whatever string you enter in here. And then there are column specific searches, which will search just among the contents of that column. When you export the results, any of those searches or those filters that have been applied will be reflected in the export. You can also rearrange columns by dragging and dropping them to the desired location. You can update the columns that you see using the column icon on the grid toolbar. Columns included in the search by default will appear here immediately, and users could unselect some of those if they want to remove them from view. If there were any optional columns, mostly found in custom searches, users could pull those into view as well. Interactive grids still have individual column sorts, and now also have multi-level sorting, much like you would see in Excel, where you can have a primary sort, a secondary sort, and a tertiary sort. Regarding persistence of interactive grid settings, table configurations will persist locally across different browsers, sessions, and devices. Table searches and any column filters are going to reset after every session. If a user is in the middle of a session and they want to reset everything back to default, we do have buttons to reset columns and clear all filters. Interactive grids still include the hover over search view, so if you're using a hover over view, that will still be available and functioning the same way it has in the past. If you don't have a hover over view and you're interested in one, you can simply build that search view for the relevant object and then assign it to be used for hover over display pop-up. Here you can see we have a hover over specific search view that we've built, and we've indicated that one to be used when you hover over a link. The next two interactive grid features are applicable to custom searches only. Prior to version 6.3.5, we had an edit column that was generated with every custom search result list. But this actually takes a lot of work on TeamConnect's part, especially if the result list is more than 200 records. We heard from clients that, for the most part, they just click the link to take them into the record if they want to make edits, so the edit column was not widely used to begin with. Thus, in 6.3.5, that edit column is inactivated by default. Users can choose to turn it back on if they feel really strongly about having that pencil icon. There is a new checkbox down here at the bottom of the custom search page that says Enable the edit column on search results. This is the button that will activate the edit column in your custom search results. We also have some new aggregations available for custom search, which is pretty exciting. If you're including a value field as part of your results display, you can choose to aggregate it by generating the average or the total for that value. In your result display, that aggregation is going to manifest like this. Here's my invoice net total column, and since I chose to aggregate the sum, I'm able to see the total invoice net total. Now this is going to be the sum of all records in this search, not just the ones on this page. In this case, we only have 12 results, so they all fit on one page. But if we had 27 pages of results, this would be the total of all 27 pages. We've included a yellow banner on this page to make end users aware of that behavior as well. There are some exceptions to our interactive grids, and you'll see those listed in the next few slides. We have some exceptions based on objects. For example, appointments and documents don't really play well with those interactive search grids. And if you're using the contact card view for contacts instead of the list view, that also doesn't play well with interactive search grids. Then we have some exceptions based on formatting. If you're going to export to Excel, aggregations won't export, you'll lose a little bit of shading in that export, and the multi-sort doesn't pull over very well, but that can easily be reapplied in Excel. Finally, we have some exceptions based on locale. The date format will always be the same in those interactive search grids, and aggregations are not supported when you're using particular locales, which are listed here. Interactive grids will be activated by default in your upgraded environment, but if for some reason you decide you don't want to use those, you can turn them off in the Search Results tab of your Admin Settings object. We have several new invoice-based features. The first of which is our new Invoice Email Digest. If you have users who are repeatedly guilty of not approving their pending invoices in a timely manner, this email can help alleviate that. There are a couple of things to note about this feature. First, users do have to subscribe to this email. At the moment, we don't yet have the ability to globally subscribe all users. But if your environment is built so that you can access the preferences of individual users, you can subscribe to that email on a user's behalf. Otherwise, users will need to update their email preferences to include this Invoice Email Digest among their subscriptions. If a subscribed user does not have any pending invoices, they will not receive the digest email. When subscribers receive this email, it will show them the number of new invoices they have and the number of total pending invoices that they have. The email then continues on to organize the user's pending invoices into categories. There are pending invoices by date received, pending invoices by total cost, and pending invoices by approval days left. And each of these color codings is interactive, so if a user clicks a grouping, they will be taken to a view of their My Approvals page in TeamConnect that has been filtered to show only those pending invoices that match the selected grouping. TeamConnect administrators can set some global defaults for the runtime of that email and the ranges included in the email. These global defaults can be adjusted in your admin settings. Toward the bottom of the Notifications tab, there's this new block for the digest emails for invoice approvals. Admins can decide what time of day that email is going to be sent out and can set the global defaults for those different ranges. The upper range is going to be that red grouping, the lower range will be the green grouping, and the yellow range is everything in between. Remember that users must subscribe to this digest email in order to receive it. They can subscribe by adjusting their email preferences. On this page, if the user so desires, they can select the frequency of the email, and they can change the ranges that appear in their digest email. TeamConnect version 6.3.5 includes a new interactive page for invoice approvals that looks like this. One thing to note on this page is that this interactive view is only applicable to pending invoice approvals, so the records must be filtered to only show invoices. If users have an all option, which could show invoice approvals, rate requests, and matter closure approvals, they won't see these widgets and they won't get the interactive grid here. They do have to filter out everything except invoice records. Users might find it useful to set their default view to only show invoice records. They can adjust that default by clicking the gear icon next to the record drop-down list. Additionally, in order to utilize this interactive approvals view, there is an admin setting that must be activated. This setting is found in the Approvals tab of your admin settings object and is labeled Display Interactive Grid View for Invoices. This setting is inactive by default, so you will need to turn it on if you want to use this feature. This invoice-only view contains 3 interactive widgets and an interactive search grid. These widgets are native to TeamConnect. They look a little bit like TCBI, but they're not. They were just built to resemble TCBI widgets for the sake of continuity. They are interactive in the sense that selections within a widget can act as filters for the other widgets and the table. For example, if I wanted to see all of my pending invoices from Baker McKenzie, I can click the Baker McKenzie slice of this pie widget, and it will filter the other widgets and this table to only show data related to Baker McKenzie's pending invoices. I can then click into the white space of any of these widgets to reset that filter. This interactive grid has a lot of the same functionality that we saw in the interactive grids for object collections and custom searches. You can rearrange the columns by dragging and dropping, and you can search the different columns using the search bars. When searching in these columns, matches will be highlighted to show you where your search string is being matched in the returning results. On value columns, we can use less than, greater than, or equal to symbols as filters. You can also right-click to remove columns or add new ones, if that is part of the approvals search view. In the request column, we have some new visual indication of line item warnings. Here, we can see that there are some warnings because this request text is in red. From this page, you can still accept or reject individual invoices outright. You can also take some bulk actions, selecting multiple invoices, and then applying one of the available actions listed across the top. Finally, we have a new Peek In feature that provides a preview of the invoice, which includes the top 5 invoice line items based on the line item net total. Though this is showing us the top 5 line items, we can still see the total number of line items in this invoice and how many warnings are included in the invoice. If any of those warnings were included on one of the top 5 line items, they would show up here, like this one. You can also see if any adjustments have already been made to line items, like this last one here. The original total was $185.17, but it's been adjusted to $0. If I clicked on this hyperlinked value, it would open a pop-up window that includes the details of that adjustment. The Peek In feature is accessed via a security permission that is applied to a group. Open the group that needs this feature and adjust the system rights to the invoice object so that they include the new ability to enable interactive grid with peek view for my approvals. This permission is located at the very bottom of the invoice permission list. Of course, if an invoice requires further review before it can be approved, users can still open the invoice record by clicking the invoice number, or from their Peek In view, they can click the View All link. There are a couple of new blocks that you can include on an invoice record that can enhance the end-user experience. The first block is the new Matter Budget Insight block, which comes with version 6.3 and will show you how this pending invoice will affect the matter's budget if it's approved. Note that this block will only be useful if you're using TeamConnect's budgeting functionality. Additionally, this block must be added to your invoice object view if you wish to use it. Within the Matter Budget Insight block, we can see how the approval of this invoice will affect various account lines of the budget. In this screenshot, we're looking at the budget as a whole, but we could adjust our view to see how this invoice would affect more granular accounts within that budget. This block shows us the amount of this invoice and the percentage that that amount makes up of the total budget for this matter. Then we can see that budget, and we can see the current spend against the budget. Then we can see what would happen to this spend if this invoice is approved. And if we had multiple pending invoices for this matter, we would see what happens if all of those invoices are approved. In this particular screenshot, we only have a single pending invoice, so these two metrics are the same, but they could be very different. Then we have a temperature gauge that shows our current spend against our budget and where our spend would land if this invoice gets approved. Finally, we have some metrics to the right that will calculate the average monthly spend based on the age of the matter and the number of approved invoices. The second new block that you can include in an invoice record is an interactive line item review block that looks like this. Once again, we see those interactive widgets, and we have many of the same capabilities that we have in our interactive approvals grid. You can rearrange your table, adjust column visibility, search columns, etc. This particular block is pulling from a search view that is indicated for use as interactive. This is a new use that comes in TeamConnect 6.3. You can apply the interactive use for any existing line item search view. You must also ensure that your invoice object view includes the interactive line items block instead of the traditional line items block. In addition to the interactivity of the table and widgets, we have two new columns in the table: the flag column and the reviewed column. The flag column is intended to help highlight line items that might need a second look. You can highlight this flag and it will turn red, indicating the need for additional review. That flag icon is sticky, so it will stay with that line item throughout the approval of this invoice until somebody clicks it again to turn it off. The review column is a local column only, so its activation is only visible to the user who turns it on. These eyes are meant to help users keep track of the line items that they have reviewed, especially in invoices that contain hundreds of line items. As the user makes their way through these line items, they can activate the eye icon next to each line item that they've reviewed, so that if they take a break and come back later, even in a new session, they know exactly where to pick up based on this visual indicator. The review column is just a local indicator that does not follow the invoice through the approval process. If you're using approval workflows for invoices, matter closure, contact creation, etc., we have a new route setting that will make sure a stop is not skipped. Previously, if no user matched the assignee of a stop, that stop would have been skipped. But starting in 6.3.7, you can activate a stop level setting that will send a workflow to the process manager group if there is no valid approver for a stop. TeamConnect 6.2.4 is accompanied by CSM 6.2.4. The biggest change with this version comes from the Collaborati side. From 6.2.4 onward, all vendors now follow a firm office structure, where every office belongs to a firm. Even single office entities will still have a firm and an office, likely with the same name. These changes bring some really great benefits for our vendors that are using Collaborati, and they also have some implications for us as TeamConnect administrators. The biggest of these implications is in the naming conventions that we use for contact cards. In TeamConnect, firms cannot bill. Offices are the entities that can bill. That being said, firms don't have to have contact cards at all in TeamConnect since they can't bill. Since offices can bill, every office that you approve has to have a contact card so that it can be linked to a matter as an involved party, and then can bill against the matter from Collaborati. The names on those office contact cards must be unique. One more time because this is important. The names on those office contact cards must be unique. The best practice that MeterTech recommends is to append office names with the office location. Here's why this matters. Let's say that Dangerfield Law is the outside counsel working on our matter. If there are multiple Dangerfield Law offices and we have not followed our best practice, we can't tell which contact card belongs to which office, and we run the risk of selecting the incorrect office, which risks the correct office not being able to bill against the matter in Collaborati. When we append the location to the contact card name, like I've done with Bird and Bird, it becomes much easier to ensure that we are selecting the correct contact. If you are pretty new to CSM, I recommend focusing on offices only. Since firms can't bill, they aren't necessary to your e-billing functionality. If you do decide to focus on offices only, you may also want to consider removing these two firm-specific portal panes from your CSM homepage. You can always add these portals back in and map firms to contact cards later if needed. This is an example of a firm profile from your CSM homepage. All the information we see on the firm profile has come over from Collaborati. You can also see all the offices within this firm and all the timekeepers approved to bill from within this firm. Another benefit of this firm office structure is that timekeepers can be authorized to bill out of multiple firm offices. When we look at a timekeeper profile, like this one, we see a General tab and a Rates tab. Again, this general information has come from Collaborati. We have two new indicators here. One is the home office, and the other is a setting to enable or disable the home office rate. In this case, Penny Wyatt's home office is Chippendale, London, and her home office rate is not enabled. So we know that she primarily works out of the London office at the rate of £200. But if she were to bill out of Chippendale, France, or New York, or Toronto, all of which she's also approved for, she would bill at that location's rate because her home office rate is not enabled. In this case, her billing rate would match the office that she's billing out of. If her home office rate is enabled, then regardless of the office that she bills out of, she will bill at her home office rate. CSM 635 supports your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. This version includes some new DEI fields in Collaborati that will push over to TeamConnect when that information is provided. Those fields are optional in Collaborati until CSM version 7, so you will need to encourage your firms to fill out that information if you require it for your internal initiatives. Data provided in the DEI fields will store on the timekeeper's CSM profile in TeamConnect. These fields do not push over to contact cards, but they are still reportable in TCBI using the new DEI starter dashboards. Here's an example of one of our DEI starter dashboards. It shows spend percentage by gender, utilization percentage by gender, quarterly spend by classification and gender, and then quarterly spend by gender. You could always copy this dashboard and change gender to race or veteran status or any other DEI qualifier. We have some big news in the world of TeamConnect native reports. First, Flash was replaced in TeamConnect 6.2.2, so graphical native reports are functional once again. Second, TeamConnect 6.3 brings with it support of left outer joins when combining data series in native reports, which is a really exciting thing for the reporting world. Keep in mind that TCBI can still support inner joins only. In the world of TCBI reporting, as of TeamConnect 6.3, TCBI dashboards and widgets can now be embedded in portal panes for use on home pages. This is done by copying the My Reports portal pane and adjusting the parameters to select the widget and/or dashboard you'd like to include in that portal pane. There's also a new starter dashboard for vendor relations, and several new fields have been added to the eCube in 6.3. We received a lot of feedback from clients indicating that it was very difficult to determine when an email was coming from an actual human and when an email was coming from TeamConnect because, when possible, TeamConnect will attach the email address of the user that triggered that notification when it was sent. So an email might look like it's coming from me just because I clicked a button in TeamConnect that automatically sent a notification. To combat that confusion, we have some new email settings in TeamConnect 6.3.3 that will make it very clear that the notification is coming from TeamConnect. In the Email tab of your Admin Settings object, we have the option to use the system reply instead of generating the user's email address. And we have an option to set the display name on system-generated emails. The system reply address is the one that you supply up here. The display name will always read TeamConnect, and at this point that cannot be changed. Here is a matrix that shows the manifestation of each combination of these features. If both settings are applied, then that email is labeled as TeamConnect and is coming from your reply to address. If you're not going to use the system email but you are going to set the display name, then TeamConnect will still use the user's email address when possible, but it will also include the TeamConnect display name. You could just use the reply address, or you could use neither one of these settings and TeamConnect will revert back to its old habits. For clients who are hosted on-premise, there's a new feature as of TeamConnect 6.3.1 that makes it easier to share your server information with us when MitraTech is offering support. That setting is found on your About page in your Admin Settings object. The two new options will send installed product information to our support team on startup of TeamConnect and send your environment information to our support team. You can see the details that will be included in that send here. The second setting, in particular, makes it easier to share your on-prem architecture. Both of these can help our product team identify features for future releases that will have a positive impact on the largest audience. In TeamConnect 6.1, our product team started developing an out-of-the-box integration between TAP and TeamConnect. The initial version of that integration was unilateral, but in TeamConnect 6.3, work was completed to make that integration bilateral so that information can be pushed back and forth between the two platforms. With TeamConnect 6.2, we now have a new DMS integration with Box. In 6.3.6, we addressed all Log4j vulnerabilities, made some updates to Elasticsearch, and fixed global search indexing errors. In 6.3.7, we made some additional updates and enhancements to our API capabilities.